Welcome back to Women Making Moves, where we celebrate the moves that women are making. My name is Amy Pons. I'm a Master Certified Life Coach and an energy healer. I'm joined today with Abi Adams. Abi is a force of nature that has cultivated confident communication, fulfilling relationships, and physical liberation, all from reclaiming her inner rhythm, also known as the menstrual cycle, and understanding the deeply transformational approach that is feminine well-being and how to integrate this into your life. Through her own personal experiences of trauma and the brutal emotional lessons life delivers, Abi utilizes a powerful blend of modalities that allow space, growth, and transformation. Training in massage, kinesiology, yoga, martial arts, calisthenics, female physiology have all come together to provide a powerful toolkit for the challenges modern women in industry and the cultural norm are facing. Her unbridled passion for feminine health and well-being propels her on a people-centered and health-first approach that benefits both the individual and the lifestyle they keep.
I want to meet this person. Where is she? Enter the building.
I am floored by this. If I could tell you that this is what I aspire to be, this is what I would aspire to be. Like figuring out all that you have. My throat chakra is not liking that I said that because I know I figured out so much already, and you beautifully reminded me that at the top of the call. I know how much power and magic is inside of me in my divine feminine. And at 42, I just started listening to her a year and a half, 2 years ago. So in some ways it feels new, although I've had this for many, many lifetimes, this skill, this ability. So I love what you're doing.
Well, thank you so much. Do you know what, my darling? I mean, we've all been there, haven't we? This point of the awakening, as Jane Hardwick Collins calls it, the waking up and the wanting to be more than what we know we currently are. But always remember, your environment has dictated where you currently are. And this is something that I fully appreciate. And this is why I forgive society. I forgive. I have to forgive. If I don't forgive, I'm going to end up in that blame culture, which makes me the victim, the continuous victim. And I don't want to be like that. And I don't want my children to believe that's how they have to be either. If we want to liberate ourselves, we've got to put ourselves in the soil that will feed us as to how we were intended to grow. And that is for everyone.
My soul is feeling very magical. And when my guides light up, my head starts to itch and my head's itching. So all the things, I'm feeling a physical manifestation and draw to you. So absolutely. What I like to think about it as, when I left corporate in 2022, I was so angry. And I was in that blame, persecution, how dare you kind of vibe. That was the frequency what I was holding, which I now know is a low frequency. Through healing and growth of 2023, it's not just about the workplace. It's also about anyone outside of myself. It's not about making them wrong. It's about me holding my vibration and my light so that when or if they ever feel called, they can see my light. And I'm standing there firm in mine. And what I got to be for me was, as an energy coach, and my modality is energy, everything was quote unquote fine for me until I was like 35. Everything was fine. It was just fine. And I was reaching all the heights in corporate America. I was making money, big titles, things like that. And there was such a deep aching inside of me, almost like a little child pulling on your shirt. I'm here. Hey, 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 do you see me? And I was rejecting finding that for a while until I started listening to her more. I now know this. This is language I never would have known back then. So what I know to be true about me was that the trusting, the going inward, the tapping into my energies, my true nature, my soul purpose, my soul plane, that was calling. And while I was being asked to only operate in the masculine of the order, power, structure, and it's now what I see has become toxic. There's an imbalance. And what I see a lot of my clients are awakening, to your point, awakening to not just what they were told they were here to do, but what they feel they're here to do. And then it becomes like an impasse because it's like, oh gosh, how do I possibly uproot this thing I've known my entire life? It can be scary, it can be baffling because nothing really looks or feels familiar anymore.
You know, I've been through the changes a lot in my life. The first one was also leaving corporate, where I could just feel myself decaying sitting behind the desk. I could feel myself crumbling, and I just did not find any fulfillment whatsoever. I made great friendships there. It was wonderful, but it wasn't for me. And so I began to set up my own business to leave the corporate world, which I eventually did. But what I realized ultimately was that I was seeking to change my beliefs around what had really happened in my childhood and how I had been showing up as a good girl, not wanting to upset everyone else, and how that was just reverberating through everything else. All of the choices that I was making towards how I was living my life were okay. And they was just focused around money because it was distracting me ultimately from what was really causing me grief. And that was not being honest,
Mhm.
not being honest about who I really wanted in my life, honest about how I was truly feeling because I didn't want to hurt anyone else. But the only person I was really hurting was myself because my choices were reflecting that. And so there were these big changes that happened throughout my life, like the leaving of corporate. And that, I'll be honest with you, that was a bit of a shit show as well, because I left in a haze, really, of destruction because I was still holding on to so much of childhood. But that kind of rolled out. And then you get the next bang, don't you? Which is again, you're being called to sort this original core stuff out, and
Yes.
you can keep wrapping crap around it. Eventually it will come out, and it will come out for a woman in perimenopause. As my good friend Henny Flynn says, this is when Pandora opens her box up. And
Yes.
you are called to really look at this, and you can either dissolve the anger
Mm.
with your honesty, or you can burn in your own flame.
You're a beautiful speaker, more than a speaker, but you're beautiful with your words. Oftentimes in my work, someone will say, why do I have to heal? Why must I heal? I'm like, you don't have to. You don't have to do a darn thing. Free will, autonomy, consent, everything. And what ends up happening is it just keeps getting louder, or things that used to be fine or satisfy you or be okay suddenly aren't. When we ignore what is being called in, and by called in, it comes up somehow. You have resonance with something outside you, and that is an invitation to go in and say, oh, what's coming up for me? What is that? It's not about the other person, the outside energy. It's about what's coming up for you. There's a reason for that, and that will just get louder and more painful if you ignore it. It's just something that keeps happening to where you're in such a low frequency, low vibration, you can't imagine getting back to neutral or getting back to the place where you felt really good again. And I really resonate with what you said. The first 20 years of my life was rooted in physical, emotional, psychological abuse and lack, scarcity. And then in the second 20 in corporate, I was seeking more of the same because that was safe and familiar. As I started to experience in my late 30s, I started to experience glimmers. I started to organically see through my two rescue pups, my husband, our beautiful home. I started to see some of the glimmers that I'd created for myself. And I was like, oh, I have that in me as well. And so what had been driving me was victim and anger, shame, guilt. I'll always share with clients, as you raise your vibration, as you heal, as you clean your energy, that which doesn't resonate with that frequency of how you're living and being starts to fall away. It doesn't have to be anything dramatic or anything like that. It just starts to fall away. It doesn't resonate with you. And now I'm getting into a lot of woo speak, but that's where I came to for myself. And now I just meet people where they are. I assess pretty quickly where they're willing to meet themselves, whether it be healing or whether it be, again, I work with energy. So I'm reading your energy and that tells me where to go. So I resonate with, I feel like everything that you're saying.
May I expand on a couple of things here? One
Mm,
is that when you said you're fine for a long time, I don't think you're ever fine. No one is ever fine. It's not an acceptable place to be. Your environment encourages you to believe that that's okay.
mm,
So we continue to be fine until we can't.
right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Your whole entire being comes to a point where it is not okay to be fine because you was born to be here to thrive and to enjoy and to love and to expand. That is what life is.
Mm-hmm.
To be fine is like keeping a flower in a really bad spot in the garden. You just wouldn't do it, would you? There's been moments in my life. I lived in India, had the most amazing experience training in yoga and yoga therapy. But I remember at the end of our time together within what you would call a course, I suppose, but for me it's always an experience. We were sitting around the fire the morning of our daily singing, and this love just poured through my body, and it just beautifully overwhelmed me. It was the most wonderful sensation I have ever felt in my life, and I have put myself in environments that bring that up a lot for me. But one of the greatest things I have ever learned is that of the menstrual cycle, which I call my inner rhythm.
Mm,
Understanding the emotional landscape of my being in this physical form has opened up so much confident communication, fulfilling relationships, and physical liberation because I realized who I was. You know, I wasn't confused or offended by myself. This was so liberating. And people ask me time and time again, why do I need to know my bleed? Why do I need to know my period? It is like the Bible of relationship guidance. To be able to relate confidently to others, you have to know how to relate to yourself. And as someone with a womb, understanding this interchanging, dynamic force of energy that is your inner rhythm will change all of that.
mm,
You know, and as an example, day 21 within my inner rhythm, I realized what showed up for me was my addiction to alcohol in a really bad way. What I then found out and what I appreciated was that it was a change in hormones. My hormones were changing. So that wasn't a reality. This moment in time for me, I had basically imprinted my beliefs of change to be destructive. And that is what carried that time for me to take me towards alcohol. Once I understood that, I was able to ask for support. I was able to put greater food into my fridge at that time. I was able to get off of social media because comparison was too great for me. All of these things that enabled me to feel better about being me. I mean,
mm.
if that doesn't inspire you to want to know your inner rhythm, aka your menstrual cycle, I don't know what would do.
Do you know that I just learned 1 month ago? I learned about the 4 phases of the
Mm,
menstrual cycle. That's a little bit mind-blowing. I'll speak from how I grew up. It was embarrassing, shameful, dirty, crass, to talk about your menstrual cycle or what's going on. And then there's the layers of societal. I like how you keep going back to environment. Well, the outside environment was telling me that I was crazy, quote unquote, that time of the month. Oh, are you PMSing? Oh, must be the hormones. Y'all, that's real, and it's not something to be mocked or laughed at. Like there is a real physiological shift happening inside of us. And when you bring up alcohol, when I was in corporate, what I would do to get through each day was I would come home and binge drink every night just to numb anything that was coming up inside of me. And I like how you call it the inner rhythm. I was ignoring my inner rhythm. I didn't want to hear from her. I didn't want to hear that I could do life a different way. I didn't want any of that. I just wanted to keep plugging away. So alcohol to numb was my vice. And I'm now going to think back there are specific days of our cycle each month in which the self-value, the self-thoughts can plummet. And that's so real. And that's when I now will take great care, wrap myself up in a big blanket and get my favorite beverage and watch a great movie. You know, just the deep love and care for yourself, knowing that that power. Abby, I just got that a month ago.
Mm,
And it's astonishing to me.
I know, I know. It is beautiful. I support and encourage and hold space on this through talks and workshops and what I call experiences. If you want to retreat, you retreat. But to me, retreat implies that I'm not managing and coping and I need to escape. I don't need to escape.
Mm.
I am a powerful human being. I deserve a bloody good time
Yes.
in really nice surroundings. So I like to go on experiences. And there are many layers to this. There is like the more scientific hormonal approach that we can discuss. There is the energetics that we can discuss, which I love to bring in like chakra psychology on this because it's really beautiful. And then there's the emotional landscape. And for me, the emotional landscape, and when I found this, I'd been training in Miami for a month, and this is when I found my bleed. It just blew my mind. I wasn't hemorrhaging, I wasn't in physical pain, I wasn't in emotional pain and tormented. It was just sweet. And that's when I came back and started to do the research and living this myself. And it transformed the way that I feel about my body and how I express myself. And I started to look into ways of how to move with your menstrual cycle on an emotional level, as well as on a more hormonal support level. So I do a lot with strength training for your hormones and your menstrual cycle. But to understand this landscape of movement and how your body responds within these different phases and seasons. So for those of you who are listening, your bleed is your inner winter. The phase after that, which is your mid-follicular, is your inner spring. Your ovulation is your inner summer. And then your later luteal is your inner autumn. And these all reflect the feelings of the outer seasons. And again, this is something that I love talking about. I educate on seasonality and the cycles of life, the rhythms of life, and how they impact the way that we communicate. And if we are in rhythm with not only ourselves, but with nature, we can reach a success that is profound. It is not forced. It is not aggressive. I mean, there are various aspects of aggressive, and a friend of mine holds this space very well. But for me, I believe that when you're in flow, it just is.
Mm.
It just is. And it just comes to being. And that for me is what I have learned from the more feminine approach to health and how this comes in for everyone. You know, this approach isn't just for women. Men learn so much from this because we know it's more men that are in the high echelons of business. You know, we have men that are in charge of companies more so than women. And for them to understand that is really empowering to them as well as their business. It's phenomenal. And we see in the UK so many men now really excited to understand menopause so they can support these really wonderful women sustain what they can do in the workplace and not have to leave unnecessarily, to not lose such wonderful people within your business. And when, you know, in 2019, I read that 900,000 women in the UK left their work due to poor menopausal support. My first thought was like shock horror. And then a good friend of mine, Kate Corrington, said, what about if those women woke up and thought, no thanks, I've had enough. I'm not going to wring myself out if the environment is not willing to support me. And they went off and started their own companies and everyone lived happy ever after. But we now realize that to lose that amount of people in a culture, it impacts the next generation because now we don't have the grandmothers educating that next generation. We have a big brick missing from the wall. So instead of filling that with a guess, keep the people by supporting the people, by allowing them to be people, not machines. And I think there is a huge reframe and refresh on this. And it's really exciting. I'm really excited by this.
I am too. I sit in this interesting place. I'm a healer and a warrior. And so I'm an activist and an advocate. So I genuinely am the light for the world and the change we want to see. And the warrior aspect of me, especially hearing the stat you just said, and you and I are two of them, meaning like we left the workplace to start our own businesses. And that's amazing. And to your point, though, also, we're still, pun intended, hemorrhaging women and people who menstruate from the workplace in astronomical numbers. And while I'm excited that many are getting it and they're talking about menopause leave or menstrual leave or education and things like that, there's still going to be quite a bit of time between that really taking hold. We're still going to be continuing to, lose a lot of amazing people in the workplace. And then Z's coming in with no fucks to give. And so,
Can I just say
please.
about your comment on it's going to take some time? I think this highlights a really strong point that I am quite passionate about. No one was really speaking loudly about this when I went into it. I found menstrual health out for myself and I uncovered so much gold. We have so much information out there now. We do. We really do. Okay. It's not easy for some. It's not easy for what we call more disadvantaged backgrounds. And this is something that needs to be severely looked at. But for many of us that are privileged, this is your opportunity to start making those changes yourself because you can. And this is what I mean by putting yourself in the right environment. This is where you reach out to people like me, you reach out to people like Amy. There are so many organizations and companies and people out there that are supporting this kind of environment. There really is no excuse if you can get your hands on a computer. This is your time. Do not stick in the blame lane and
Right.
remain the victim because
Right.
we'll be waiting for a very long time. Yeah. I'm not going to go to my grave angry that it didn't happen when I could have made the changes that I did. And I tell you, it's not as hard as what you think it is. The honesty with yourself,
Mm-hmm.
the trust within yourself, the deep belief that you are valuable, that you deserve to be valued will inspire you to make these changes. And they really are not that difficult.
The individual, absolutely. And that's again, I love that you and I are out here. We are fanning the flames of individual women to find that for themselves. What I mean about the workplace is that I've seen older white men terminate mid-level women
Yeah,
for missing too much work from menopause. And so what I mean by that is like taking time is like we can absolutely do that for ourselves. And I see that happening every day for women to stay in the workplace. That's what I find is a little bit more challenging for them to get it.
absolutely. And what we're looking at that generation that is behind us, and
Yeah.
that mindset is very, very hard. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I totally get that. And this is why I love being a woman. I also love men and I love my non-binary human beings. And this is why we cannot keep speaking to just women
Right.
because we're keeping that conversation to ourselves. It has to open up
Mhm.
to include the men. And I've had for a long time when I've been going into companies, and like the first thing I get is, "What about the men?" Well, that this is for them.
Yeah.
I understand that my language has to be inclusive.
Yeah.
I am not angry about that.
Right.
I am not angry about that. If I am as passionate as what I say I am about making this transition, this transformation, I want my brothers and I want my fellow men to feel comfortable because I know that this can feel quite scary. And I know that there are so many men out there that are now afraid to say anything because they don't want to get in trouble and they don't want to upset people. I know this to be true. And that makes me feel sad as well because I've got a young son and I don't want him to feel like that. So, what am I going to do to be part of this movement? And I am more than happy to open up my conversation towards men and for non binary to be involved in this. This is so important. And this is why I transformed Project Woman into the House of Human Movement
Mm.
because we are all in this together. We are all in this together. Please step forward. Show me your vulnerabilities. I'll show you mine. I
Yes,
will show you mine.
when we stand, again, I'll always speak from an energetic perspective. Energies aren't gender specific. For me, when I'm standing in my goddess energy, which is that energy that allows space for any human to provide both their lived experience and their perspective, and we come to a general understanding or a common understanding about how to move forward, that's fucking exquisite. That is the highest vibration, the highest frequency that we are moving this together. That's where it
It's
is.
such a great word, Amy. Exquisite is such a great word, isn't it? Just
Yes,
makes your whole body go, oh, yes.
that is what we're talking about. So many times I have to reiterate that when I'm talking about the feminine or the masculine, I'm not talking about gender. And if you've never heard of those, you're making an assumption. So to your point, let's bring everybody into the conversation. Let's bring everybody in. Let's talk about it. And one day we could even maybe talk about erectile dysfunction openly, whatever. But I want to go to a post because beautifully, a post that you made recently is exactly what we're talking about here. So I'm going to read it aloud. I'm in one of those moods. A partner, colleague, and friend spoke about an experience with their husband recently where he asked what was wrong, and this was her response. If we are to refresh the support toward female health as well as create a dynamic space for all genders to thrive in, we have to be confident in our communication. Otherwise, we will continue to drive a wedge between understanding and empathy as well as feel our own shame. Breaking down this response, one of those moods reflects the bias toward a woman, not sure of what she's feeling, and that women remain hysterical. This does not create lifelong partnerships or productive relationships. It simply exacerbates everything we're fighting to change, and we wonder why we're fighting all the time. We can't expect men to understand if we don't understand what we are saying ourselves. And this is where my lived experience and knowledge helps in refreshing, resolving, and reframing our beliefs and communication so we can dissolve the barriers currently at large. Yes, tell me more about this.
This is what I mean about clear communication. This is why, if I'm looking at a woman or a human with a womb, why understanding your inner rhythm, this menstrual cycle, the change of hormones, the impact that has on the way that you communicate, the way you understand your beliefs, they change every 2 days within this cycle. They are in constant flux. So when you are communicating, that will be different in each phase of your cycle. And this is why I talk about your energy power pockets within your cycle, because women are not time managed. We are energy efficient. And when we tune into these pockets, we can tap into those energy resources so naturally. And this is different in regards to, like I said, we traverse this landscape. So in one phase of your cycle, you are really good at speaking. You're eloquent in the way that you communicate. You just get it across. Then there's another point where you are more in the zone for reflection and fine tuning and those finer details like accounts when you've got to have really good attention. The next is if you're creative, you get these amazing opportunities to download your ideas so you can start seeing instead of trying to make all of them happen in one day, you have a pocket of energy within the month of your cycle that you know is coming up, so you ain't got to worry about it. This also happens with your emotions. So if you know that your emotions are changing and you're aware of that, you can have the wordsmithery to back that up. Now, this friend was in her luteal phase. If she'd have known that, she could have said, right now I'm feeling really tired and I'm feeling overwhelmed, which is what she was. I could really do with you picking up the children. I could really do with you cooking dinner for me this evening. And I might just take some time out and just go for a walk. But history repeated itself. And she just wrapped all of that up in what she said. I'm in one of those moods. Can you see how history repeats itself time and time again in something so simple as that short sentence? And her partner was so interested in knowing if she was okay. But again, she just reaffirmed her own shame. So who's to blame here? No one, really. There's no blame there whatsoever. But what we're looking for is for genders to feel safe within this refreshed communication because it's not new. It's thousands of years old. Menstrual cycles have been going for a very long time. It was revered at the start of our humanity. This is refreshing this conversation that enables the woman and the human within women to feel confident in what they are saying, but they've got to feel that confidence first. You can think confidence all you want, but it happens on a cellular level. It is a full embodied response. There is a muscle which has to be flexed. So when you start speaking confidently about the way that you feel within your emotional landscape, you're actually educating that partnership. You are educating them. You are giving them an emotional vocabulary that is renewed to them. So now there is this amazing dance of transformation between these two human beings.
I'm now looking toward building my business around my inner rhythm. I actually block out the days where it will not serve me or others to have an interpersonal interaction. And sharing with my husband as well, it's like, today I'm feeling this. For instance, I'm in my ovulation phase right now. I get ovulation cramps. I don't feel good this week. And I'm grateful to know this.
Looking at these crampers, again, everything is a language and a communication, right?
Mm.
So when we look at cramping, we're looking at, well, it could be many things, my darling, but what are you cramping on? And I know this is a healer that you get this, but for those listening, it's for you as well. But what are you shutting down?
Mm-hmm.
What are you holding on to that needs to flow? What are you fueling your body with? What are you surrounding yourself with in this time of ovulation of your inner summer? This is about being in flow. This is magnetism. You got to remember, like the menstruation and the inner summer, these are the North and South Pole. They don't need you to do anything to them. They just isness, yeah. It's either side of that is the traversing and where we have to put a bit more of our attention to. But they are poles of power, baby. And in ovulation, this is where you are speaking your truth. You are holding cool. You are just is. There's not much that you need to do. If you're cramping here, look at like environment, beliefs, all of these things because it's just flow. The body is unbelievable at sorting stuff out. We might not like the way it sorts the stuff out, but ultimately it's just communicating with you to pay attention because something isn't quite right here.
For me, my cramping during ovulation is around my choice to not have children and the judgment of which all of my 30s I received about that. That still lives in me. So that's what I'm working with her on.
Mm. Thank you so much for sharing that, darling.
Sure.
And for those listening, how much sense does that make? It can feel quite like far out, yeah. But I just want to highlight as well this term woo woo. This term woo woo really is the fear. Yeah.
Right? It's
It,
yeah,
it,
I live in the woo, so I'm
but it's not even, I don't even believe there's not even a
it's
thing.
knowledge,
Uh,
it's awareness, it's consciousness.
it's a
Yeah.
deeply respective relationship with you and life.
Sacred nature, understanding. Like
Yeah.
we try to, as in the human experience, I find that we try to over engineer something that has, nature is the playbook. Nature's always had it figured out. For me, like when I had my awakening and what I'm conscious to now is deeply within myself, my energy and how that relates to nature and energy and the poles, the universe. I mean, it's all being part of that one consciousness. So it's beautiful. I could talk to you for hours and days. As
Same.
we start to wind down, what would you share with people who have a womb or who can menstruate that feel embarrassed talking outward about it because it's something very personal? what would you share with them to maybe help liberate them and know that we can't force anyone to share anything they don't want to? But what would you share with someone that still feels hesitant to talk openly about their internal experience, specifically around the womb or uterus? And then also those without a womb or uterus who feel there is no place for this type of conversation in, let's say, a public forum or a workspace. What would you kind of say to both of them?
I would say to both, track your inner rhythm for 3 months and then tell me. For those without a womb or a uterus, we are looking at a different rhythm. And you know what I find quite sad? That they've been made to believe that they stop rhythming. There's no rhythm now. It's gone. That's so not true because you're alive. You know, as long as you are alive, you are part of the heartbeat. As long as you are alive, you are part of nature. You are a vibration. You're an energetic force that is meant to be here. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. So for you to find a rhythm, and I know so many women, and I use it myself, the lunar rhythm is such a beautiful marker. And the way that I get this into a lot of corporate women's diaries is for them to use it as a way to rest.
Mm.
Because we use that lunar calendar, they know when they can drive and they can get out there and they can be dynamic. But then they have the permission to take their foot off and start to slow down. Because if they didn't have that lunar rhythm, they wouldn't. And they would just keep burning and burning and burning. And that in itself is phenomenal. And they start using that. And then guess what happens? They start to feel the energetic imprint. They can feel the shifts and the tides. They become aware of it. They're more attuned to it. They start to receive a bit of magic,
Mm.
like these wonderful visions, this guidance. And then they tell me, I get what you mean now.
Mhm.
I remember. Yeah, I remember.
Oh, Abby, where can we find you?
You can find me everywhere. I'm on Instagram. I am on LinkedIn. I am on YouTube. I am holding a women's experience in the Maldives in August, from the 12th of August at the Ritz-Carlton in the Maldives. I have the autumn immersion in Cornwall in the UK on the 27th of September, where we will be heading into the dark side of the feminine, where we will evoke the deepest of our powers as we learn to harvest the year and appreciate the communication and vibration of autumn, which is integral to the way we will step into 2025. This is an experience to change all experiences.
Mm, I'm going to look into that. I'm a witch. Closing remarks as we wrap up.
It doesn't have to be this hard. You do not have to fight anymore. When you are in the environment that you was born to be in, it will all come together. And believe me when I say that it exists and it is waiting for you.
Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.